decided somehow divide our job, and Vano, as planned, was speaking more specifically about Georgian politics of the last years. I will maybe speak about broader regional framework, and maybe I will have more overlaps actually with what Boris was talking about. Now, Caucasus is of course some kind of battleground region or fault line region. I think that has been its identity in a way. It means not only that it's famous for conflicts within the region, but it is also that it's after breakup of the communist system, its place in the world was somehow undecided. There was, of course, I mean, Russia claimed it as its own backyard, but the West, the European Union and NATO could not really, or the United States could not really make up their minds clearly what is their attitude to the Caucasus. And it's also at this point, it's still a matter of disunity within the European Union, difference of opinion, how European this region should be considered and how much commitment EU or NATO should have to it. This battleground, as I said, it is a battleground within Europe. I mean, in terms of difference of opinions, it is about different orientations of countries in the Caucasus, but it is also a battleground of ideas within each of the countries. So this contributes to a special complexity of this region. But what is this competition about? What the battle is about? I think especially in 1990s there was a trend to interpret this competition in traditional geopolitical terms, especially because the most conspicuous or notable issue was about oil and transportation of oil and oil pipelines. So some people spoke about great game, and that was somehow the dominant paradigm, let's say so, in conferences, international, debates, what the Caucasus is about. And I would say that at least with regards to one country in the region, which is unfortunately not represented here, as Krzysztof highlighted, Azerbaijan, it is probably still the case. I mean, Azerbaijan is still considered in this light, that where will Azerbaijani oil go and things like that, and gas. But with regards to Georgia especially, and generally the region including Caucasus, but also what one could call now EAP region, the battleground gradually moves, the center of competition gradually moved to political values, political institutions. And I think the game changer was first Rose Revolution in Georgia, then Orange Revolution in Ukraine, 2004. And this assessment does not really depend on whether I, as a Georgian-like government which came after the Rose Revolution, or how we assess successes or failures of so-called Orange government in Ukraine. This revolution meant, on the one hand, that the peoples, respectively of Georgia and Ukraine, made very clear choice in favor of European style norms and institutions, on the one hand. But on the other hand, it was perceived by Putin and by Russian regime as kind of geopolitical challenge, as a hostile act to Russia. And authors of this hostile act in Russian eyes, or eyes of Russian political elite, were not people of Ukraine or people of Georgia, but some scheming forces in Washington or partly in Europe, that this brought this American or Western stooges to this region. So what people in these countries and also in the West saw as expression of people's power or wish of these peoples of Georgia and Ukraine to go in the European direction, and European direction means democratic direction, that of societies based on human rights and trying to get rid of endemic corruption, things like that. For Russia it was geopolitical fight. And that new paradigm in a way was born. And I would say that one of the most dramatic expression of this paradigm was 2008 war in Georgia. Of course, as in every case like that, picture is complex and there are different interrelation of different problems, but ultimately it was Russian punishment of Georgia as a country for its daring to go in certain direction, and also punishment of the West for somehow pushing Georgia or trying to get Georgia out of Russian sphere of influence. Now, the second game changer, I would say, was European Partnership Program, which is a very paradoxical, I think, event in history of Europe. On the one hand, it was not successful at all if we judge it on its own terms, in the way how it was intended, but it was much more important and productive than it was intended, one could say. First of all, European partnership was in a way prompted by the 2008 war. It was recognition by European Union that something has to be done about this region, but there was also lack of consensus and lack of unity and common vision what exactly has to be done about this region. So this program itself is sort of vague and muddled. I think there were this joking Russian abbreviation of this region called Bumaga, which is Belarus, Ukraine, Georgia, etc., but it's also in Russian means, of course, paper. It's just piece of paper. It does not mean anything. But it turned out that it meant much more than it even intended to mean. That it became some kind of moment of truth, and this was popular to say during the Vilnius summit, that it pushed countries and politicians and political leaders to make very painful and difficult decisions. Of course, the most dramatic results it had for Ukraine. But as Boris also spoke, of course, it pushed Armenia to make a very difficult, painful, and divisive decision, although it did not reach to such dramatic consequences so far. So, while this program was supposedly kind of low-key, low-profile, and unthreatening to anybody, on the one hand, and it was supposed to bring these countries together, the result was that it proved extremely threatening to Russia, unexpectedly for Brussels and for, analysts, European analysts. Russia considered it as a kind of hostile takeover project, and also it became divisive between the countries and sometimes inside the countries. And we may lament this, we may hope for the better world where this is not so and this region is kept together, but this is what it was. And we should take this reality as it is. So now we have 3 countries which have made choice in favor of Europe, and 3 other countries who each of whom have made their own independent and separate choices. And Europe has to deal with this new situation as a result of EAP program. Now, Georgia has been among those countries notable for maybe most consistent and solid support for both European and Euro-Atlantic integration, EU and NATO, and as Vano mentioned, it is steadily reflected in public opinion polls, including those carried out by IRI, who is of course co-sponsor of this event. And it continues to be like that, and so we Georgians, as does not matter, civil society representatives or politicians, are usually sort of proud of it. But I don't think we should be also complacent about it. Yes, we have quite firm and consistent choice in that on that issue. However, we also see, especially in the last years, when somehow the stakes went up in the region in general, that there is also much more active and open work of pro-Russian forces or Russian propaganda. We all mentioned this, so I don't need to talk too much about it. Of course, we should not blame everything on Russia. There are genuine kind of feelings within sectors of Georgian society, as in all societies across Europe, within European Union, outside European Union, does not matter, that European Union takes away some important, parts of sovereignty or national culture and uniqueness and so on. But it is also obvious that Russia has some kind of concerted policy to support anything which is anti-European within the EU or outside the EU, and it is clear that Russia also invests in Georgian anti-European or by default pro-Russian groups, and we cannot all prove it maybe in each particular case and each particular occasion, but the general pattern is quite obvious. And of course, for a democratic country, it's always difficult to choose what to do about it when you have this kind of hostile propaganda on your home ground. Everybody has is free to express his or her opinion, if it's anti-European or ultimately anti-democratic and anti-liberal. But this is a new situation, and numerically openly pro-Russian forces, parties still have not very big numbers of supporters, around 15%. But we know also from the nature of democracy that active minorities are sometimes more important, and their real influence is greater than public opinion polls may suggest. So this is some kind of new challenge to Georgia as well. But the main thing, of course, is that the mainstream parties have to be firm in their European choice. So far, we have really bipartisan support. We have extremely confrontational political culture, unfortunately. And I would say, especially in the last 2 years, that no Georgian government was nice to its opposition. That has to be admitted during the last 20 years, I would say. But what we witness in the last 2 years is especially, let's say, so un-European attitudes to the opposition, to put it very mildly. But despite this, we have, if there is anything on this competing and hostile, often Georgian parties agree, mainstream Georgian parties representing the parliament, is that we continue together to this goal of European and Euro-Atlantic integration. We had bipartisan resolutions on that, and that's a good news. But we also should not fail to recognize that bipartisanship does damage our pro-European policies, not only in that kind of un-European attitudes to opposition in general, and considering opposition as enemies, not just as political opponents, but also it often damages expressions of political support for the causes which we should support. And Ukrainian attitudes to Ukrainian events of the last year, approximately last year, it is one issue at case at issue, sorry for my English. We also have general bipartisan expression of support for Ukraine, but I think that it should have been stronger. I think in Georgia we have generally in Georgian public very strong feeling that Ukrainian fight, what happened in Maidan, on Maidan last winter, what's happening right now in Donetsk and Luhansk, it is a fight for Ukraine, of course, first and foremost, but it is also a fight for Georgia. That fate of Georgia is also being decided on Maidan or now in eastern Ukraine. It's a general fight of Russia, of Russian autocratic regime, which is motivated basically by resentment against success of global success of democracy, and resentment against Georgians and Ukrainians wanting to be democratic nations, and in that sense preferring Europe to Russia. So this fight is deciding, the outcome of this fight is decisive for the fate of the region, and Georgia has very direct stake in that. And therefore I think, I don't know whom we can compete with. I guess that Poles are following events in Ukraine very much, but I think Georgians may be the most interested nation outside, and of course we cannot compete with Russian interest, but Georgia has been especially, following Ukrainian events with especially strong interest. We had numerous expressions of solidarity, demonstrations, etc. But official political expressions of this solidarity has been somehow behind this perception which is in Georgian public, which Georgian public has. And this is caused, I think, largely by some kind of jealousy, partisan jealousy, I would say, that Mr. Saakashvili or reforms carried out by this government are often seen as a, to some extent model for Ukraine. It has been reflected also by specific Georgian reformers being invited to join Ukrainian government, which is, I think, it's up to Ukrainians to decide whether they want purely Ukrainian cabinet or a mixed one. I sometimes compared it with football teams now, that you invite international stars to strengthen your team. But it's up to Ukrainians. But we as Georgians should be proud, I think, whatever is our partisan affiliation is, to that, Ukrainians respect so much what we did in our country, our own country, and appreciate not only our solidarity to Ukraine, but also to lessons which they may learn from our experience. But I think, yes, I know, this is my last sentence, but this partisan jealousy sometimes undermine the solidarity which is only natural for Georgia, which comes very natural to Georgia, and I think should be expressed more. Thank you.
Thank you.